Hello, everybody. Sherry Leopold here. I'm super excited to share a wonderful friend that I have, and she is an amazing woman. I want to welcome Sabrina Protic, who is a financial coach, but she's just also an incredible wow warrior and an amazing woman. Welcome, Sabrina.
Thank you so much, Sherry. I always love being a part of the Wow Network.
Oh, thank you. And I often say that wow warrior means like when someone sees you, they just say, wow, you are that person 100%. So I want to talk a little bit with our viewers about who Sabrina is. So I'll just throw out, I mean, you're a multi best-selling author 5 times,
Well,
six,
yes,
seven,
that's
10.
close.
I don't know.
Book number 6 just came out, so there you go.
There you go. We're just racking them up. But
Yes.
a very prolific author, but also a financial coach and very interesting career path that you've taken. And one of the books that you've done, we're going to talk about is this one right here, which is Hindsight to Insight, which is money between family and friends. And I was just kind of looking through some, I've read it, but I was looking through some of the details that well, I don't know if you can see, but my highlighters.
Oh, I see that.
And, I was reviewing it, and it was like one of the things that really sticks out to me, Sabrina, about this book is this isn't just like this is a wealth building book or this is a finance book, and you should do this.
Mhm.
I really like the fact that when you put this together, there's a lot of your personal stories and history and learning lessons,
Yes.
especially in it. So, can you tell us a little bit about why you wanted to write the book first? I think that's important for people to understand and maybe even explain the title.
Well, great. I was just watching Sarah Blakely yesterday, and she was talking about failing forward. And her dad didn't consider her successful until she had failed. So when she came home every day, what did you fail at today? And that's how she found her success. And this book is really about that. It's my failures along from childhood, from the very first time I went to that corner store, and you have to read the book to hear about that story. But I failed financially at a very young age, just going to buy a loaf of bread. So I thought, why not take my life lessons? And I'm a lifelong learner because I made so many mistakes along the way because I didn't have a financial coach. My parents were very limited in what they told me because they were limited. So what I learned was just generational. And now here at my late age, I'm studying, I'm constantly learning, and I'm applying. I've been able to turn my life around financially. I am in the green. By that I mean I'm not in the red, debt chasing me. And so I figured share this. And I didn't want it to be a talking head book. And like you mentioned, Sherry, I didn't want it to be a bunch of marching orders with no real world application. So I figured the best way to get people to apply is to share my story.
And I think that it's just so full of little stories like that that illustrate how and why the lessons that you teach in here are so important. And a big one is really just kind of points at financial literacy for children and starting young. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm pushing 60 here, and there's a lot of things I've learned so much about wealth building, financial uh independence, all those things in the past 5 years. And it
Mhm.
might be one of my laments is that I wish I'd known, back when I was raising my children what I know today. They're doing really well, and that because
Yeah,
you've helped one of my children
I do
uh,
know.
with that. But still I have that sort of, I don't want to call it a regret because it's not really a regret, but it is something that I just wish I could have done differently. And it's something that I encourage my kids now to really put in the forefront and have be part of their raising, right? Can you speak
Yes.
about how important that is and why that's important?
Yes, I talk about in the book how my kids started a coin collection when they were young. And because I wanted them to appreciate the value of money from coins to dollar bills, we had rare dollar bills. We had pure silver Kennedy 50-cent coins, which they're pretty much out of circulation. You can still get them, but you have to hunt them down. But just teaching them the value of money and saving, that was like their investment. That was starting them young with something like that. Then I opened, the minute they were able to, understand money, I opened up a bank account for them at the bank. They still have those bank accounts today. They still have them, but just teaching them the value of saving. And then when they get to a certain age, Sherry, we have to teach them how to multiply their money. That's the missing piece. Teaching them how to multiply. And I'm sure you will agree, we've all done a great job of helping our kids get an education, whether it's high school or college, teach them to get a good job, earn a decent salary, but we don't teach them what to do after that. Okay, I got the job, I got the paycheck, I got the house. I'm in debt now. I got a car payment and a house payment. Now I've started a family. Now what?
Well, and it's one of those things where then that's where they get into credit card debt, and they get into the situation where even when they start to begin to accrue a higher level income, they don't know how to manage it. And I often think of my friend Carla Green, that I love her because she's always said, somebody that's truly building wealth thinks about their dollar bills as soldiers. And when they're going out to war, how they're going to win the war for them. They're working for them. Your dollars are working for you. And I think if you're not taught that, you think, I have dollars, how can I spend them? And that's the predominant prevailing thought, I think, across, well, I don't know about the world, but I would say it's definitely across the US.
And if I might add, a lot of young people, when they get married, they want it all right then. They want a house, they want a new car because that's what their parents have, but they didn't realize mom and dad worked years for that. But so a lot of these couples start out with everything, including the bill. And so they haven't really worked. And I'm going to share just a quick story. Sure. A guy I work with, he earned $50,000 a year. Now that was 30 years ago, which that was a lot of money, $50,000 a year, single. He had a small little airplane. I think he had inherited it. He lived in a hangar for about 5 years, banking that $50,000. At the end of 5 years, he had $1 million because he had his money going to work for him. So he lived very frugal. He was able to buy a boat, went over to the Caribbean. Now he has a boat that he takes people on tours. He's living the dream because he loves the water. He loves fishing, life on his terms, but he started meager. So my coaching at this point is to live meager until you can afford the next level. Try to avoid the debt where possible. There is some debt we have to incur. Let's be realistic, but try to avoid the unnecessary. I'm driving a 2013 Nissan Rogue that's been paid for 5 years ago. And I'm not going to trade that in for a car payment. I'm going to drive it till the wheels fall off. But I'm also positioned to be able to get another car and pay cash for it if I have to, so that I don't incur debt. And this is what we want to teach, is being in control of your finances, understanding the flow of money, understanding debt, income, expenses, life, and wealth building.
That is like so much in that statement that you just said. So much. I really want to actually ask you, if somebody was going to read Hindsight to Insight, which I do recommend in the front, and I recommend right this moment, which you can get on Amazon or on sabrinaprotic.com. What is the biggest lesson? If you could say, oh, I want the reader to take blank away, what is that one prevailing thought that you just really, really want somebody to take away when they read the book?
Wealth building is for every culture and generation. I didn't even think the word wealth could come out of my mouth, because I was a ham and egger. I was a 8 to 5-er, 40 hours a week. And I didn't think the word could come out of my mouth. So I didn't wealth plan. I didn't wealth build. So the one point is that anybody can wealth build. And when I use that word, I don't mean filthy, stinking, rich, unnecessary, money coming out of your ears. I mean, being in control of your finances so that you can meet your financial obligations and still have money to enjoy life, take a vacation, take the husband and wife to dinner, to do the things that you find enjoyment with your money. So that's the one takeaway, is wealth building is for anyone.
And I'd also like to add to that, I think that, and it's clear in the book, is that it's never too late. So, I'm almost going to be 58 this month. It's not too late to start. Now, I might not be able to accrue what I would have been able to accrue if I'd started at 18 or 28, or maybe, I don't know, it depends. But the reality is it's never too late to learn about money. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree with that. And back 30 years ago, when I didn't have a whole lot on me financially, I had a credit union at my job, and I was saving $300 a paycheck because I could, so it was going straight to the credit union. I couldn't rest. Oh, I got $1,000. I got $3,000 in that. And I was planning to spend it. Every time I say, oh, well, let's go on this trip. Let's go on this cruise. Let's go on this vacation. Because I didn't have that wealth building mindset. So I was learning to save it, but I was spending it. So we did a calculation. Sherry, if I had continued to save that $600 a month, I would have $4 million right now. $4 million. But I wasn't taught that. I wasn't taught to put it away, invest it. We are talking about investing it. So that was with that money earning about 8% interest. I would have $4 million. But instead, I wore it. I ate it. I shot with it. And clearly I could save it. It was coming out of the check, but I just didn't know what to do with it once I had saved it.
And I think part of that is, I think when people think of saving, and maybe it's just my thought process, because you do address how we are raised, and our money story really sometimes is handed to us. And if we don't change it, it stays the same from generation to generation. But we have the opportunity to change it. And I think some of that, I think there's an interesting thought process that surrounds the word save. And I think sometimes people think saving means I have it, but I can't, it's not really mine. You know what I mean? Like it's not accessible, or I don't have control of it, or I don't know, maybe like it's a lack mentality, but attached to the word save, which I think is really ironic, because there's a great deal of reason why you should have that savings. One of them being an emergency fund. Can you just share a little info on the emergency fund? Because you do talk about that also in the book. And I do want to circle back. Don't let me forget. I want to circle back to the word burn.
Yes.
The whole thing about the word burn was
you like that, don't you?
I love that.
I love that story. So I want you to share it since you read it. But so savings, we should have 3 to 6 months of savings. Well, why is that? That's your emergency fund. If something happens, several years ago when the pandemic happened, and I found myself like I was at work at 7:30 and I was walking out the door at 8 because I had lost my job. They were downsizing. And if it had not been for me saving, I would have been like in a world of trouble. So I was at a point in my life where I could make decisions financially. I wasn't desperate. I didn't have to go get a job at a fast food joint real quick, because I needed money, because I fortunately had saved. So you've got to have that emergency money, the just in casers when something happens, to be financially secure. But as you mentioned, there's this thing about flashing cash and money to burn. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, I just thought it was really interesting because you give a lot of different narratives around the word burn, but it's based on a story about someone who actually lit, was it a $10 bill?
Yeah, it was a $10 bill
on fire. And I just and that being introduced later was like, oh, this is so-and-so, they have money to burn. And actually, I think part of that story, like what resonated with me, is that when you're not afraid of your own or worried about your own ability to make money also, because I think there's some part of that, you'll be able to make more, right? Like if you
Yes.
lit it on fire, I mean, which isn't necessarily recommended, of course, but if you lose it, like you share a lot of stories where you had setbacks where you invested in something and didn't vet what was and lost money. Those things, take money that you set aside for something else, thinking it was going to be one thing, but you didn't fall apart because you said, I can still make more money. Like you didn't
Yes.
have that fear, right? You
Right.
are an income creator. And I think that's also a really big piece of this, right? Of being wealth minded and wealth building minded is knowing that your ability to earn is really limitless or only limited by what you think about yourself as well.
Exactly. And, during that time period, quite a few people lost their jobs. And the biggest money blunder that most of them made, and I know that because I'm a financial coach, is they lived out of their 401ks. So here they were putting money away, and for the first time in their life, they're handed $30,000, $40,000, $100,000 from their 401k, and they started living out of it. Now, here's the problem with that. Unless you're over the age of 59 and a half, that's going to cost you 30% in taxes, 20% early withdrawal plus a 10% penalty because you are under the age of 59 and a half. So 20% in taxes and then an extra 10% because it's early withdrawal. That's 30%. So let's add some reality. If you had $100 bill, then you're going to take $30 and give that away. That means now you got $70. So this is what was happening.
For everyone, not just one.
Yeah, exactly. $100,000 means you're giving $30,000 away. And some people did that. $30,000 to Uncle Sammy, and they lived out of their $70,000. Not being financially coached. A better thing to do at that time would be to get a job, get a second job, create some passive income, and put your nose to the grind. Be an income creator. And if you got to take $5,000 because you're really hurt, but don't live out of that. Understand the tax implications. And not only that, now that's considered income. So you just raised your taxable income. No, I really didn't make $100,000 last year. Yes, you did, because you got $100,000 in your 401k. Now you raised your taxable income. So there's so many things that we need to understand about our money and our reaction to money. Yes. And our comfort level. Correct?
Yes, absolutely. And, I wanted to point to something that we kind of scooted over, but you said that happened to you right at the beginning of the pandemic, because we were talking about the emergency fund. And a lot of times when something like that happens, people absolutely panic and, oh my gosh, my life is over, whatever. But that was not your reaction to that particular event. You knew that you were secure because of what you had done with your retirement, with your emergency fund. Mm-hmm. You knew you could sustain for a certain length of time. But I think also that emergency fund allows the space to actually take a pause and say, what do I actually want to do here? Mm-hmm. Because you didn't jump. You could have just immediately went to a headhunter and started looking to get into the exact same thing that you were doing in that corporate structure. But that's not what you chose. That actually led you to a path of really true freedom. Am I right?
You're exactly right, because I technically could have retired. I could have said, let me just take my cookies and go home. Or I could have gone to work and sought employment, but I'd already done that. And I'd already proven that I could do it, that I could do it very well. I was really good at what I did. But I was at the point in my life where I didn't want to just take care of me. I wanted to impact the lives of other people. And I wanted to take my failures, my mistakes, and help other people my generation, my children's generation, and generations to come, so that they're more prepared for life financially when things happen, loss of a job, health situations, family members, the world, tornadoes and earthquakes and all these things that are happening, tsunamis. And how do we live through those things? And how are we positioned? When these hurricanes come to Florida and devastate areas, how are we positioned financially so that we can still survive? So I chose to get a license and become a financial coach to help people. And it's not the easiest thing to do because most people don't want to talk about money. But the reason they don't want to talk about it is they're not comfortable with it, or they think they should hide it or not talk about it. And that's the big mistake that I made. I share in my book. We didn't talk about it. So no discussion, no life improvement. So there's a saying that there's, wisdom in words, and listen to people who have the wisdom, learn from them. And this is what I'm doing now. That's my passion now. I speak at colleges, universities, the individuals, schools, events, company functions, whatever. I've spoken to companies about being financially secure and knowing their financial security number. I teach people to understand that. What's your financial security number? Most people don't know that. Once they know that, now they have a framework to work with.
I think that's right. And it's like going through life without a goal, right? I mean, that's
Yes.
really what it is. And we're certainly not going to teach that. I know we could go on for like
Yes.
3 hours if we started talking about what they don't teach in schools for financial literacy. I mean, they teach you percentages and how to add, but they don't teach you how to manage
No,
dollars,
they really don't.
which is a big part of life, right? And actually a big part of a college student's life. I think it's a gaping hole, if you will, in our education system. Is, the world revolves with money in tow. It's part of our lives, but we don't provide any education truly on that topic, or how to manage it, or what to do if we have enough, if we don't have enough, if we have enough that we can, save, or if like you said, something comes up, my car breaks down, etc. We just don't have the education necessary, I think, for most people. And I think that's also coupled with, if I were going to say, I would think there's one thing that a huge takeaway out of the book, aside from what you pointed to earlier, is just that it's time to talk about it. It's time to have it be as easy to talk about as the weather. It's just a normal thing. People, I think, especially in my generation, was like, you can't say, well, oh, what sort of salary are you earning in that, doing that? To be like, oh, you asked that. Like, and it's like, it's just money. It's just like saying, do you want to wear pants or do you want to wear a skirt? Like, to me, it's just like the same thing. I don't know why we have such a stigma around the topic of money. Everybody has to use it. Everybody needs it. Most everybody that I know at least wants it, or at least, well, very minimum needs it, right? But I would say the majority don't have any clue how to manage it at all, even though we have to some way.
Sherry, I love what you just said. I couldn't have said it better. The reactions to money that, you start talking about it, and the fact that you're saying it, it. The minute you say, oh, well, what are you earning here? What do you make? Did you just ask me, what am I earning? Did you just ask me how much money am I making? Well, let's get comfortable with this conversation.
Yeah, and it's not from a bragging standpoint. I think that maybe in some people's history, we'll put it that way, or backstory, is that there's people that say, oh, well, I make 6 figures or I make 7 figures, and they throw it around like it's something you hit other people with. And that's not actually what that is about. But I always say, when something pokes you, you need to look in the mirror, right? Like, if you feel some kind of way about something, you got to think about, how do I think about this? Because it's usually what it is that's poking something in you, like the same with the wealth. And I remember a friend of mine, Sharon Jameson, she was talking about, I was listening to a talk that she gave, and she said, the conversation in a room with very high level income earners is very different. And she said, I realized that when I went to a mastermind that had, very influential people making a lot of money, they were very comfortable saying, yeah, I'm looking at this piece of real estate that's it's like 2.5 million. Like the numbers they were talking about were like saying $5. And it wasn't from a bragging standpoint. They were literally having a conversation about investments. And she said the conversation's different in those rooms. And she said, I had to step back, and she said, I had to think about how I thought about that, because it kind of took her aback, because that's not how she grew up. Because she grew up with a minister father and it just wasn't talked about. Let's just put it that way. It wasn't bad, but it just wasn't a topic of conversation. And so she had to do a lot of learning around that. And I think that's really where we're at is, maybe realizing we don't know everything about it. And if we know nothing about it, maybe it's time to pick the book up, Hindsight to Insight, take advantage of some of the learning that you've already done for us, and just take those baby steps. The entire journey starts with that first step, right?
I agree. And thank you for saying that, Sherry. You have to open the door.
Yes.
Be comfortable talking about money. Be comfortable reading about money, because you don't ever have to see me again. Read the book. And I've given you such a start, and you take it from there. Of course, if you want to reach out to me, that's fine. I can help you implement some things, but I wish that someone had these conversations with me.
100%. And you know what? That's actually what I said in my review of the book too, is literally, if you're sitting at a position where none of this makes any sense to me, I wouldn't know where to start, I can't do anything, this is a good choice, because this is very basic. It's a good starting point. It gives you some really good things to think about. And you know what? Go to sabrinaprotic.com, schedule some time to talk with Sabrina, and just maybe find out what your first step is going to be for you. It might look different depending on your age, depending on your resources, but you'll never know until you make that first step. So, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share, Sabrina?
Yes, my final thought is never take financial advice from someone who is either not licensed or who do not have a proven track record. So that's going to eliminate your best friend, your cousin, JoJo down the street. We find ourselves taking advice from people that they're not even there yet. So please work with someone who's experienced, licensed, they understand and have studied and learned, and that they're also practicing what they teach. That's another thing. What are they doing? Are they walking the talk? So that's my final words to you is take this seriously, but don't take advice, and don't you be giving advice unless you have a proven track record of financial success as well.
100%. And I always say, don't take advice unless somebody, especially on financial stuff, unless somebody is making way more than you are and they're making what you'd want to make. And you wouldn't know that unless you had the conversation, like we said. So
exactly.
I think that's really sage advice, Sabrina. I want to thank you so much for taking time out today and chatting with our viewers about money, wealth building, wealth creation, and all those things that you're so incredibly knowledgeable about. Once again, Sabrina Protic is a financial coach, and she can help you get your money story sorted out. So make an appointment with her at sabrinaprotic.com. Thank you, Sabrina, for being my guest today.
Thank you.